Well, it's described as the largest mobilization of queer groups in nearly 20 years. Rallies taking place across Canada next week to protest the rise of anti-2S LGBTQIA hate. It's being organized by many community organizations. It also includes the Canadian Labour Congress and Oxfam. Here now is the executive director of one of those groups, Tyler Boyce of the Enchante Network.
Hate is not a partisan issue. No Canadian in this country deserves to feel like they can't leave their house in safety. No worker in this country needs to feel like they can't go to work in safety. But unfortunately today, due to politicians putting us, our communities, my loved ones, as wedge issues in a broader culture war that, like Fae said, Canadians no longer need nor deserve. Folks in my community, our member organizations across the country, don't feel safe to go into work because of their identity.
Well, to talk more about this, we're now joined by Fae Johnstone. She is the executive director of the Society for Queer Momentum. Fae, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me on today.
Listen, I know that you made your announcement today because Parliament will not be sitting next week, and so you wanted to take advantage of parliamentarians being here. But, you know, the timing is certainly quite pertinent because just yesterday, CSIS released their annual report. And in that report, they warn that there will be violence fueled by anti-gender ideology. Does that conclusion surprise you in any way?
Absolutely not. You know, we've been warning about this for years, and we have all the data to show hate is on the rise. The Overton window is shifting, and it's becoming more normal to direct vitriol towards our trans friends, our queer friends, and there's really a lot at stake here that should concern all Canadians.
Mm-hmm. So talk to us. You're not surprised, you say. So what have you observed? Next year aside, what currently exists right now, the stories that you're hearing that people are sharing with you?
You know, what I'm hearing is stories of parents being doxxed for speaking out to defend their kids. Pride organizers, local LGBT activists are receiving death threats and targeted by this powerful far-right lobby that is really trying to shove us out of public life to make it harder for us to speak our truths. And my worry is that this is just the beginning. You know, we saw 100+ protests at schools, drag events, and in communities across Canada last year. And there's a lot at stake here on our journey towards a more free and equal Canada for all Canadians.
What's the effect on that, on the community then? Because as you say, there have been dozens of these anti-drag storytime protests, for example, across the country, people going to LGBT organizations. What has been the effect then on the level of safety people fear and the freedom with which they feel that they can gather?
I think people are scared. You know, I'm hearing from folks who are worried, again, about their kids going to school. The bullying is rising in those classrooms because of some of the rhetoric that premiers are spreading about our kids. And when you have a government saying it's okay to talk about kids this way, it allows your playground bully to do the same thing. And so we really are seeing a lot of fear and anxiety. But on the flip side, my hope is we're speaking up, we're telling our story, and we're going to show Canadians that my community isn't a threat. We just want to live our lives, pay our bills, contribute to our economy, just like every other Canadian does.
Mm-hmm. Which I'll get to in a moment. But you said something interesting there, that kids can be spoken in this way. In what way are kids being spoken about that endangers them, do you think?
There's this language as if there's, you know, some cult or some ideology being pushed in our schools. And that's actually meant to cause fear and cause anxiety. When actually what we're talking about is efforts to make sure that whether you're a gay kid, a trans kid, a Muslim kid, or a disabled kid, you have the freedom to be yourself at school, that you're safe in that classroom. We participate in Pride Month for the same reason we celebrate Ramadan, to give kids a sense of belonging at school, to let them know that they have every right to be themselves.
Well, you know, you mentioned provincial premiers, and certainly there have been policy debates, federal and provincial, and right now we are hearing premiers across the country talking about trans issues, but they're doing so in the context of parental rights. How do you counter that argument? Because, you know, at the end of the day, if a parent feels that they're going to be disconnected from decisions being made about their child, they're going to push back.
Absolutely. And, you know, the first thing to understand is that the overwhelming majority of parents, and more parents than ever before, we know that they support their kids. And we want parents as involved as possible. But what we also know is that trans kids need to be able to come out just like a gay kid would if and when they're ready to do so. And often a kid needs the space to come out at school before they're necessarily ready to come out at home. But our end goal is shared. It is healthy schools, healthy families, and strong relationships that allow young people to be supported by their teachers and by their young folks. The struggle here is these premiers are using a dog whistle. They're poisoning the waters by insinuating that there's something scary or bad. And at the end of the day, that's not what's happening. What's happening is efforts to reduce bullying, to improve, to make kids able to stay at school instead of dropping out, as too many trans kids do. So that's what we need to get back to, is safe schools for all kids and all families.
Mm-hmm. It's a powerful statement, though, and I think it's building a little bit on what you're saying here, because parental rights, again, how do you tell a parent that they cannot be involved in their child's life? Because that seems to be the implication.
And that is what they're trying to make us think, right? But when you're a teacher and you have a kid come out to you, for example, your first step is to say, thank you for telling me this, for trusting me, and I support you. Your next step is to try to help that kid, if they're not ready to come out, to have that conversation with family. Again, our historic policies in schools have allowed teachers to work with guidance counselors, with mental health professionals, and absolutely with families, so that these conversations can happen and that everyone is safe doing so. And so a lot of it is using this language to roll back and force out efforts to make schools safer for kids. In Saskatchewan and in Alberta, they're making it harder for kids to learn about diverse families, about families with 2 dads or 2 moms, or about folks whose gender just happens to be different from what that doctor when you were born thought it would be.
Mm-hmm. We could go on in the conversation, but I do have to ask, because you made this announcement because Parliament is sitting this week and not next, but you actually have a week of action slated for the next few days. So talk to us then. What is your bigger strategy? As we hear, people at a very high level, provincial governments, making policies around trans issues, how do you talk about your side of the story? How do you talk about your message up against very established, infrastructure?
What we're talking about is a more free and equal Canada for all of our families, for rainbow equality. I am so proud to live in a country where we have been a bastion, a beacon around the world for marriage equality, for trans rights. We banned conversion therapy. We are building a more free and equal Canada where, regardless of your gender, where regardless of your sexuality, regardless of race and all those other factors, you have that freedom. And so that is our message. The opposition is using misinformation, these misleading slogans, and a whole lot of hateful rhetoric. But we're speaking up for love, for compassion, for diversity, and united our voices are going to get Canada back on track to deliver for everybody and not engage in this discriminatory behavior.
Okay. Faye, thank you very much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and I hope that we'll have folks across this country tapping into our rallies at www.rainbowequality.ca.
Okay, you got that one in. Thank you for that, Fae Johnstone.